During the celebration, they laughed at my pain. Hours later, their whole world collapsed. None of them saw it coming. The glass seemed to leave her hand in slow motion. Dark purple liquid arced through the air, catching the light from the living room chandelier before slamming into the front of my dress. The cold, sticky splash hit my chest and stomach, soaking straight through the white fabric I'd ironed so carefully. The juice spread in a jagged, blooming shape, a violet bruise on pale cloth, loud and ugly as laughter. And the laughter came. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. I heard only the soft thud of the empty glass landing on the rug, and the faint hum of the music in the background. Then the dam broke. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Skylar, you are terrible, my daughter-in-law, Tanisha, shrieked, bending over with giggles, not a trace of disapproval in her voice. The guests joined in, snorting, chuckling, pointing. A few tried to turn away, covering their mouths, but I still caught the shimmer of their amusement, the way their eyes flicked to my ruined dress. My 8-year-old granddaughter stood right in front of me, her small fingers still wrapped around the now empty glass. Her eyes glowed with something I knew was not innocence. "Mommy said you don't belong here," she announced in that sing-song, sugary tone people call cute on a child. The words rang inside my head like church bells on Sunday morning. Loud, clear, and impossible to pretend I hadn't heard them. Tanisha didn't correct her. She didn't say, "That's not true," or "Don't talk to your grandma like that." She just laughed and went back to passing around plates of cake, as if my humiliation were the entertainment she'd hired for her own birthday party. My son Marcus pressed his hand to his mouth as if shocked, but the sparkle in his eyes gave him away. He was amused. Maybe not as openly cruel as Tanisha, but he wasn't horrified. He wasn't angry on my behalf. He was entertained. I felt the juice seeping through the thin fabric, cold against my skin, sticky where it clung. That dress had cost me $150, a reckless luxury for a 64-year-old woman who watched every bill, every grocery sale, every bus pass. I had bought it because I wanted to feel elegant for once. I had told myself this birthday celebration would be different, that this time my presence might actually matter. How foolish that hope seemed now. My fingers trembled slightly as I pushed myself up from the chair. The chatter hummed around me like bees, but no one offered a napkin. No one asked if I was all right. A few guests watched with the fascinated discomfort people have when they witness something cruel they don't intend to interrupt. "Grandma, aren't you going to say anything?" Skylar asked, tilting her head, lips curved in that oh-so-sweet smile I knew too well. That child had not thought up this little performance on her own. Someone had wound her up and pointed her at me like a toy. I let my eyes drift to Tanisha, who was cutting another slice of cake with slow satisfaction, shoulders relaxed, face glowing with smug delight. She didn't look my way at all. "No, sweetheart," I said. My voice came out calm and level, even surprising myself. "I don't have anything to say." I turned and walked toward the kitchen, my shoes sticking faintly on the hardwood from the juice dripping off my dress. Behind me, the music grew louder. Someone turned up the volume, and the laughter resumed, now mixed with the clatter of forks on plates and the murmur of gossip. In the kitchen, I found a dish towel and ran it under cold water. My hands moved automatically as I dabbed at the stains, but the purple patches only smeared wider. The grape juice had sunk deep into the fibers, just like the years of little cuts and insults that had soaked into my heart. I could still hear them in the other room. Someone imitated my shocked expression, and the others roared. To them, this was a story they'd tell later, something like, "Remember when Skylar spilled juice all over Grandma?" That was hilarious. In every version they retold, I would become more ridiculous, more pathetic, more deserving of ridicule. I kept rubbing the cloth against my dress, though I knew it was pointless. The fabric rasped under my fingers. My reflection in the small microwave door showed a woman with damp cheeks and pursed lips, not quite crying, not quite composed. Just tired. For years, I had walked into this house with a hopeful heart and a homemade dish, thinking, maybe today will be better. Every week, every birthday, every Christmas, every casual Sunday dinner, I repeated the same ritual. Show up, bring something, be grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they gave me. I always told myself that the problem was me. Maybe I was too old-fashioned. Maybe I didn't know how to talk about the things they liked. Celebrity gossip, social media, whatever Netflix show they were obsessed with. Maybe I was too quiet, too careful, too different. Maybe if I tried a little harder, cooked a little better, spent a little more, they would see me. Standing there in that kitchen with grape juice soaking through my bra and my retirement money bleeding out into a ruined dress, I finally faced a truth that had been waiting for me for years. They didn't want me there. I wasn't truly family to them anymore. It was an obligation. A box to tick. Invite mom, otherwise people will talk. Include grandma, or it will look bad. I was the extra chair they couldn't quite throw away but never really used. The music swelled in the living room and someone shouted, "Come on, let's take pictures." I could imagine them arranging themselves. Marcus and Tanisha in the center, Skylar perched in front like a proud trophy, everyone laughing. I knew already that I would not be in those photos. I wrung out the towel and set it on the counter. My dress was still soaked and stained. My cheeks felt hot and tight, but my eyes had gone dry. There are some humiliations that burn past tears and plunge straight into clarity. I walked back through the hallway, but instead of turning toward the living room, I went to the front door. My handbag hung on the little hook where I had left it. I took it down, found my keys by touch, and opened the door. No one called my name. No one asked where I was going. They didn't even notice. I stepped out into the cool evening air. The sky was streaked with late-day colors, rosy clouds sinking behind the rooflines of the quiet neighborhood. My car waited at the curb, old and slightly dented, but reliable. I walked toward it feeling each breath clearer than the last. In the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Damp dress, stained fabric, smudged lipstick. But my eyes looked different. The woman staring back at me had a steadiness in her gaze that I hadn't seen in years. Determination. It sat on my face like cold December frost, sharp, clean, and unyielding. The drive home blurred into a stream of familiar streets and forgotten billboards. My building, with its peeling front steps and creaky hallway, had never looked so comforting. I climbed the stairs slowly, the damp fabric clinging to my legs with every step. Once inside my tiny apartment, I slipped off the ruined dress and draped it over the back of a chair. The purple stain stared back at me like a bruise that refused to fade. Instead of crying, I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the small kitchen table, and let my mind wander. Only this time, I didn't push away the memories that hurt. 5 years, almost every Sunday had followed the same script. The invitation would come late, usually the night before. "Mom, you can come for dinner tomorrow if you want. Nothing big, just family. If you want." Like they were doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful they hadn't forgotten me entirely. I'd be up before dawn, starting on something special. A pie recipe clipped from a magazine. A new casserole I'd seen somebody raving about on TV. A tray of cookies decorated carefully, one by one. I'd spend $30, $40, sometimes $50 on ingredients. Money I did not really have to spare. I would arrive right on time, balanced carefully so I could make it from the bus stop to their front door without dropping the dish. Tanisha usually opened the door, phone in hand, eyes sliding over me before landing on whatever food I carried. "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything," she'd always say, even though they never told me not to. My dish would end up on the far end of the table, away from the main spread. Conversation bubbled easily when other people's food arrived. The fancy takeout platters, the store-bought cake in a branded box, the dish that another guest had brought and that everyone rushed to taste. "This looks amazing," they'd say, to each other. To me, at best, "Thanks, Mom," over a shoulder. By the end of the night, my casserole dish or cake tin would return to me almost full, still heavy in my hands, plastic wrap stuck loosely over the top. Sometimes one polite slice is missing, as if they'd taken just enough to avoid being accused of ignoring it. I always smiled. I always said, "Oh, that's fine, I'll have it for lunch," as if my heart wasn't dropping like a stone. Then there were the gifts. Last year, for Marcus's birthday, I'd done something I swore I wouldn't. I spent $200 I didn't have. He'd mentioned a particular watch once. Just once, in passing. I went to that jewelry store downtown, the one I'd seen on TV ads but never dared to enter. 2 bus rides each way, my feet throbbing by the time I got home. But I held that little box like it contained not just a watch, but hope. At the party, he opened everyone else's presents first. A game, a shirt, some new headphones. Mine sat at the end of the table, as if it had wandered there by mistake. Finally, he picked it up. "Oh, this is from Mom," Tanisha announced, sounding almost bored. He pulled off the wrapping with one hand, attention already drifting. When he opened the box, his eyes flicked down and then away. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured, closing the lid without even trying it on. He set the box aside next to some crumpled napkins and empty cups. When Tanisha handed him her gift, a shirt that cost half as much as the watch, he stood up, laughed, and modeled it for everyone like he was on a runway. They snapped photos. They posted them online. The shirt made it into every picture. The watch stayed in its box. Sometimes, I thought the smallest hurts cut the deepest. A forgotten gift. An empty chair at the front row of a school event. A photo where everyone smiles together while you stand off to the side, cropped out of the frame long before the camera ever clicks. 4 school plays and swim meets. I never got official invitations. No little cards, no emails, no group messages. Instead, I overheard mentions in passing. "Yeah, Skylar's swim thing is on Thursday," Marcus would say into the phone when I happened to be in the room. "Swim thing." I'd repeat softly, "You mean a meet?" He'd always look slightly uncomfortable. "Yeah, Mom. You can come. If you want." There it was again. If you want. I would go, of course. I'd spend grocery money on a bouquet of flowers or a small stuffed animal Skylar could hold in a victory photo. I'd ride 2 buses and walk several blocks to sit in the back row, clutching my purse. I clapped the loudest when she stepped onto the podium. Pride swelled in my chest every time. That little girl, my only grandchild, shivered with excitement under the bright lights. I wanted the world for her. But afterward, when it was time for pictures, the pattern repeated. Marcus and Tanisha gathered with Skylar, and someone always said it. "Just the parents in this one." I'd step aside, smiling like it didn't matter, while they posed for photo after photo. The bouquets I'd brought never made it into the snapshots. Later, when those pictures appeared on social media, all smiles and glittering medals and clever captions, it was as if I had never been there at all. Invisible. That was the word that floated into my mind now, sitting at my kitchen table in my stained slip. Invisible in their photographs, invisible in their lives, except when a bill was due or a favor was needed. The worst nights, though, were Christmas. 4 years, I had poured nearly $500 into gifts for their little family each December. I'd start saving in June, cutting back on meat, skipping outings, choosing thrift store shoes instead of new ones, just so I could afford something special under their tree. I'd wrap everything with care, matching paper, ribbons tied in neat bows, handwritten cards with messages that always ended in "Love, Mom" or "Love, Grandma." Their gifts to me came in plastic bags or wrinkled paper. A candle that smelled like chemicals. A sweater a size too small with the clearance tag still attached. Once, Tanisha handed me a half-used jar of expensive face cream. "It broke me out," she said with a little laugh. "But maybe it'll work for you." I said thank you. I smiled and pretended it was exactly what I'd always wanted. That was my role, to be grateful, no matter how little thought they put into me. Now, with the chill of the ruined dress still clinging to my skin, another truth landed with final weight. It hadn't been love that kept me going back. It was scary. Fear of empty Sundays. Fear of being the older woman in a tiny apartment with no one to call. Fear that if I stopped giving and giving and giving, I would disappear completely. Tonight, something inside me had snapped, but not in the way they would later claim. It wasn't madness or spite. It was more like waking up after years of walking through fog. For the first time in a long time, I looked at my life as if it belonged to someone else. If that woman were a stranger sitting across from me in this small kitchen, tired, used, dismissed, what advice would I give her? Leave. Stop letting them do this to you. Take care of yourself for once. I stared at the grape-stained dress over the chair as if it were a witness. That splash of purple had taken what remained of my denial. No matter how I scrubbed it, it wasn't coming out. And neither was I. At least, not the same version of me that had walked into that house earlier tonight. Under the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the cheap wall clock, I made a silent promise to myself. This was the last time they would laugh at my pain for free. They didn't know it yet, but the woman they thought they could use forever had finally drawn a line. And the next time they needed me, the answer would not be what they expected. The Monday after the grape juice incident, I woke with the kind of clarity that doesn't come often in life. Like the world had shifted half an inch overnight and suddenly came into focus. I didn't cry when I got home the night before. I didn't lose sleep replaying the humiliation in my mind. Something inside me had hardened into resolve. Because the truth was, this wasn't one bad night. It was the culmination of years. Years in which I had quietly carried burdens my family never fully saw, much less appreciated. I opened the small metal lockbox where I kept my most important papers, the ones I never let out of my sight. Inside were loan agreements, bank receipts, mortgage statements, and the dog-eared copies of documents I had clung to like a lifeline for 6 years. Seeing them all gathered in one place was jarring. The numbers alone felt like a slap. Thousands upon thousands of dollars I had poured into a family that treated me like an afterthought. But to understand how I got there, I had to go back to the beginning. Back to the first time Marcus asked me for money, the first moment I ignored the voice inside me that whispered, "This isn't right." It had been 3 weeks since my husband, Robert, passed away. The house still smelled faintly of flowers from the memorial service. I was 58 and suddenly living alone, adjusting to silence in a home that used to echo with the comforting sounds of a marriage. One quiet afternoon, Marcus knocked on my door. He looked tired and red-eyed, and for a mother who had just lost the love of her life, seeing her only child in distress was unbearable. "Mom," he said, sinking into the kitchen chair before I even invited him in. "I'm in trouble at work. I need $5,000. Just for a little while. I swear I'll pay you back in 2 months." I didn't hesitate. I didn't think of the leaky roof or the drafty windows I'd been planning to repair. I didn't think of my dwindling savings. All I saw was my son, the baby I'd once rocked to sleep, sitting at my table looking defeated. So I wrote him a check. 2 months became 6. 6 became 12. When I finally asked about repayment, Marcus exhaled hard and said, "Seriously? You're going to hound me about money right after losing Dad? That's pretty low, Mom." I apologized. That was the moment, though I didn't know it then, when the pattern truly began. After that first loan came the second. A credit card bill. Then the deposit for a bigger apartment they really needed, because Skylar was growing. Then a car repair. Every time, Marcus promised repayment with a sincerity that seemed believable in the moment. Every time, the money vanished like smoke from a candle. But the requests were never accompanied by gratitude. There were no warm hugs, no shared moments of appreciation. Instead, a strange entitlement grew, blossoming quietly in the spaces between the conversations. Then came the big ask, the day Marcus and Tanisha invited me to lunch, which should have been my first clue something was coming. Their smiles were rehearsed. Their tone was sweet in that overly careful way people use when they're about to ask you for more than they should. "Essie," Tanisha began, placing a manicured hand on mine, "we found a house we really love. But I don't qualify for the loan by myself. We were wondering if you'd be willing to co-sign." Just a formality. Just a formality ended up being the costliest phrase of my life. I remember the day at the bank. I wore the same black suit I had worn to Robert's funeral. The loan officer shuffled papers with the clinical efficiency of a man who didn't know he was watching someone make a life-altering mistake. Marcus and Tanisha smiled reassuringly. "Mom, trust us. Nothing will ever fall on you. We've got this." So I signed. And in signing, I unknowingly tied my financial fate to people who were already sinking. For 2 years, things seemed fine. Or maybe they pretended well enough that I didn't worry. Payments were on time. The house was beautiful. They threw parties in the new kitchen. I walked through the front door sometimes and smelled the rich aroma of Tanisha's cooking and thought, maybe I did the right thing. Maybe they really are settling into a stable life. But I wasn't invited often. Mostly, I saw glimpses through photos others tagged them in, weekend barbecues, shiny appliances, holiday decorations that must have cost a small fortune. Then the calls began. At first, I thought it was a mistake. "Miss DRI," the voice said on the other end of the line, "the mortgage for the Elmwood Avenue property is 30 days past due." I froze. "I'm sure it's a misunderstanding," I said quickly. But it wasn't. By the time I spoke to Marcus, the payments were already 3 months behind. He had lost his job. He blamed the economy, the company, bad luck, coworkers who didn't like him, everything except himself. I remember looking at the bill that night and feeling physically ill. If I didn't pay those missed months, foreclosure was guaranteed, and because I was the co-signer, my credit would be destroyed alongside theirs. Fear is a powerful motivator. And fear of losing my home, fear of losing what little financial stability I had left, pushed me to empty every reserve I had saved. $8,000. Just like that. Marcus thanked me with a hug that felt like obligation more than affection. Tanisha barely acknowledged the sacrifice. They moved on as if I'd merely loaned them a cup of sugar. But what followed was worse. A slow erosion of boundaries, a growing expectation that I was their automatic safety net. When payments were late again, I covered them. When the water heater broke, I paid for the replacement. When Tanisha pointed at glossy magazine photos of kitchens with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, Marcus turned to me with a hopeful expression and said, "It would really increase the value of the house, Mom." $4,000 more. 6 months of double shifts. My back is aching. My hands are cracking from harsh cleaning chemicals. My body slowly wears down in ways they never noticed. When they finished the remodel, they threw an elaborate party. I wasn't invited. I saw the pictures online, Tanisha posing proudly next to the granite island I had paid for, Marcus smiling with a drink in hand, Skylar perched on a chair that cost more than my month's groceries. I sat in my living room that night with my laptop open, scrolling through photo after photo, and felt something in my chest constrict sharply. That was the first night I let myself consider the unthinkable. They don't love you. They only love what you can provide. But even then, I pushed the thought aside. I chalked it up to a bad moment, a misunderstanding, hurt feelings. I didn't want to believe my own son saw me as a resource instead of a human being. Then came Skylar's 7th birthday. I had spent months preparing the perfect gift, a horse-themed dollhouse with miniature leather saddles, handcrafted stables, and tiny horses that looked so real I half expected them to neigh. $300. Hours of choosing the right pieces. Wrapping each item so she could unwrap them one by one. Yet when I arrived, the gift table was divided. Real gifts in one place, mine in the corner like a donation box someone forgot to hide. When Skylar opened her presents, the dollhouse pieces were treated like an afterthought. She didn't even realize they formed a set. The magic I had imagined for her dissolved into scattered packages and polite smiles. Then came Marcus's words that still sting when I recall them. "Next time, Mom, just give us cash. It's easier. Easier. Easier to treat me like an ATM. Easier to skip the pretense that my presence or effort mattered. Easier to convert my sacrifice into something more useful to them." That night, I sat at my kitchen table while the pieces of the dollhouse stared back at me from the counter, still wrapped in the gold paper I had so carefully chosen. And I cried, not because of the money, but because I finally understood they didn't want my love. They wanted my wallet. Then came the Bahamas vacation, the one I paid for entirely. They posted pictures every day. Sunsets. Cocktails. Matching swimsuits. Skylar smiling at the beach. Marcus and Tanisha looked happier than they had in years. No invitation. No mention of my contribution. When they returned, Marcus shrugged and said, "We didn't think you'd enjoy the beach, Mom." That was the night something in me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a fracture in a stone that goes unnoticed until the whole thing crumbles years later. Now, sitting in my apartment days after the grape juice incident, I opened my lockbox, spread every document across the table, and understood the truth. I had spent more than $43,000 on a family who didn't see me as a person. And I had one final decision to make. The kind of decision that changes everything. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the only lawyer I trusted, Attorney Silas Jenkins. "Silas," I said, steadying my voice, "I need to know how to remove myself as co-signer for my son's mortgage." There was a pause. "Estelle," he said slowly, "are you sure?" I looked at the papers spread before me. The bills, the late payments, the loan records, the notes, the receipts, the evidence of every time I chose them over myself. "I'm certain." Silas agreed to meet me that same afternoon. His office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish, and framed certificates lined the walls behind him. He was in his 70s, with silver hair and a sharpness in his gaze that suggested he had seen every kind of family conflict imaginable. But when I laid the documents before him, every receipt, every transfer, every late mortgage notice, his eyebrows rose. "Estelle," he murmured, flipping page after page, "you have been carrying more than any one person should." We discussed what withdrawing from a co-signed loan meant. He explained the consequences plainly. Without me, the bank could demand the full remaining balance immediately or proceed toward foreclosure. He warned me that my decision, though legally justified, would not be received quietly. "I'm prepared for that," I said. At least, I believed I was. The next morning, I called the bank and requested the official paperwork. The loan officer, Mr. Sterling, sounded confused, almost cautious, as if worried he had misheard. "Miss dear, are you sure? The loan is current this month." "Currently because I had paid for it." "Yes," I replied. "Please send me everything I need to initiate the withdrawal." When I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. It felt like setting down a weight I'd forgotten I was holding. But peace never lasts long when others depend on your silence. 3 weeks later, at 6 in the morning, my phone rang. Marcus. His voice, normally indifferent unless he needed something, shook with barely controlled panic. "Mom, why did we get a letter from the bank? About you removing your name? This has to be some clerical error, right?" "It isn't," I said, keeping my tone even. A long pause followed. I could imagine him standing in his kitchen, the letter in his hand, staring at the words he never expected to see. "But why?" he finally managed. "Because of what happened at the party. Mom, it was just a silly accident." There it was. The minimizing. The rewriting. The refusal to acknowledge the years that came before. "No, Marcus," I said softly. "This isn't about spilled juice. This is about 6 years of treating me like a paycheck instead of a mother." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, "But this is our home. Skylar's home. You can't just, Mom, you can't do this." "It's a house I've been paying for," I corrected gently. "One I'm not welcome in." I hung up before he could respond. 5 minutes later, Tanisha called. Unlike Marcus, she didn't bother masking her fury. "Essie," she snapped, venom dripping from every syllable, "you selfish old woman. Do you want to ruin your granddaughter's life? Over some stupid resentment?" Her voice could have cut glass. "You and Marcus have made it very clear I am not part of that home. I replied. Now you are simply being asked to live within your means. You think you're punishing us, she screamed. You're punishing Skylar. No, I said. You punished her when you taught her cruelty. I hung up. This time, I silenced the ringer. They didn't stop. They escalated. Over the next week, Marcus appeared outside my workplace 3 times. He waited near the entrance, pacing, wringing his hands, his face twisted with worry that quickly shifted to anger when he saw me. Mom, come on, he said one evening as I tried to walk past him into the parking lot. We're family. Families don't do this to each other. Families, I replied, don't humiliate or manipulate the people who support them. He scoffed bitterly. We already apologized. No, Marcus. You minimized. That's not an apology. His jaw tightened. Fine. We're sorry. Happy. Now go fix the mess you made. That was when I knew he didn't see me. Not truly. He saw a resource. A lever. A tool. Not a person. The next afternoon, I came home to find my car keyed from front to back, deep, ragged grooves spelling out a single ugly word, egoist. All 4 tires were slashed. I called the police. The officer who took my report didn't promise justice but offered advice. Ma'am, he said gently, intimidation usually gets worse before it gets better. Install cameras if you can. The following days proved him right. Rotten eggs smashed on my front door. Red paint balloons hurled at my windows. Phone calls from unknown numbers that went silent when I answered. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. I arrived home one day to find Skylar sitting on the steps outside my apartment building, her school uniform rumpled, tears streaking her cheeks. She had walked several blocks alone. Something she was too young, and too sheltered, to have done willingly. Grandma, she whimpered. Mom says you're going to make us lose our house. Why would you do that to us? My heart clenched. Not because of guilt, but because of the cruelty of adults who would weaponize a child's love. I knelt beside her. Sweetheart, I said gently, what's happening is not your fault. It's not your job to fix adult problems. I walked her home myself. Tanisha waited at the door with arms crossed, face tight with fury. Marcus hovered behind her, eyes darting everywhere except my face. Mom, he said, gesturing toward Skylar as she rushed inside. Look at what you're doing to her. What am I doing? I said quietly. Or what you're doing by using her as a shield. Tanisha scoffed. Oh, please. She's upset because you're selfish. No, I corrected. She's upset because you taught her to be. I left before they could respond. That night, all 4 of my tires were slashed again, and my windshield shattered into a glittering web of broken glass. A note was taped to the door of my building. Last chance. Sign the papers. Stop being stupid. Something inside me trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. The people I had loved, supported, fed, gifted, and rescued had turned into strangers capable of hatred toward me. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done revealing truths. 2 days later, I received a call from a name I barely remembered. Brenda Miller. She used to work at the construction company where Marcus had been employed before he was mysteriously let go. Mrs. Estelle, she said quietly, I found some documents from when Marcus worked here. I think you need to see them. We met at a small coffee shop. Brenda arrived with a manila folder clutched to her chest. Her hands trembled as she slid it across the table toward me. Please don't ask how I got these, she whispered. Just read them. Inside were copies of falsified invoices Marcus had altered to steal money from his employer. A $300 lumber purchase inflated to $1,300. A $200 cement order rewritten as $700. At least 15 similar documents. How much did he take? I asked. Our estimate is around $8,000, Brenda replied. He was never charged. The owner didn't want the hassle. But he was fired for cause. My stomach twisted. Brenda continued, I thought you should know because yesterday Marcus came by asking for a letter of recommendation. He said you were sabotaging him. But the things he said about you didn't sound like the woman I met years ago. She hesitated, then added, he claimed you were unstable, that you were ruining his life out of spite. A chill slid through me. Marcus had been preparing the ground, painting me as the villain. But Brenda wasn't the only one. That night, I called Darren Scott, a former supervisor. Marcus, he said. That boy threatened to accuse me of theft when I discovered he was selling company tools. Next, I called Patrice Washington, who had worked in HR. Miss Estelle, she said, your son used to brag about how easy it was to manipulate you. He said you signed whatever he put in front of you because you were scared of losing family. The final call was to Leonard Bell, an accountant. Marcus asked me to forge income statements, he said. I refused. But I'm not sure he stopped there. By the time I hung up, the truth lay before me like a map. My son hadn't been unlucky. He had been dishonest. And I had been his easiest victim. The next morning, I brought everything to Silas. He scanned each page, his expression turning from concern to hard, cold resolve. Estelle, he said, we're not just defending your right to withdraw. We are building a protective wall around you. If they try anything legally, we'll be ready. And then, as if the universe wanted to test that promise, it happened. I pulled into my apartment lot after work and saw Marcus. But he wasn't alone. Two men stood beside him, broad-shouldered, tattooed, with a kind of posture that suggested intimidation wasn't a hobby but a profession. My instinct screamed at me to drive away, but something deeper told me to stand firm. Mom, Marcus said, forcing a smile. These are my friends. They want to help us sort this out. One of the men took a step forward. Ma'am, he said smoothly, your son tells us you're having trouble understanding what's best for the family. Maybe we can explain things. His smile never reached his eyes. I inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Marcus, I said, tell your friends to leave before I call the police. His smile faltered. What are you talking about? I lifted my phone and opened a photo I had taken, one of the falsified invoices Brenda had given me. I know everything, I said. The blood drained from his face. If you or anyone else threatens me again, I will send every document I have to the authorities. The two men exchanged looks. Marcus swallowed hard. And for the first time in my life, he backed away. But the storm wasn't over. 3 days later, a formal lawsuit arrived. Marcus and Tanisha were suing me. For malicious abandonment and intentional harm to family stability. I held the papers in my hands, stunned. But Silas only gave a dry laugh. This, he said, is exactly what they shouldn't have done. They've opened the door. Opened it to what? To the truth. The day of the hearing arrived with a crispness in the air that felt almost symbolic, like the world itself had exhaled in anticipation. I wore my best black suit, the one I had once saved for important occasions, though for years my important occasions had mostly involved family gatherings that left me feeling invisible. Today, though, I felt tall. Not powerful exactly, but steady. When I entered the courthouse, I saw Marcus and Tanisha already seated across the room with their lawyer, Arthur Trevino. Tanisha wore a conservative dress and an expression of sorrow so theatrical she might have stepped off a stage. Marcus looked jittery, unable to stay still, his knee bouncing out a frantic rhythm. They didn't look at me. Silas arrived moments later, nodding toward the bench with quiet determination. Remember, he whispered, they brought this to court. That gives us the right to answer every lie with truth. The judge, Honorable Evelyn Thorne, entered the courtroom with a no-nonsense stride. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at the file before her, and said, "Let's begin." Mr. Trevino rose, clearing his throat dramatically. "Your Honor, this case involves a vulnerable family, a young couple and their daughter, who have been destabilized by the actions of the defendant, Ms. Estelle Dri. She has withdrawn her co-signature maliciously, out of spite, causing emotional distress and imminent financial harm. Judge Thorne blinked once, unimpressed. Mr. Trevino, she said dryly, are you aware that the defendant has the legal right to withdraw her co-signature at any time? Trevino faltered. Yes, Your Honor, but... And do you have precedent suggesting a legal right becomes illegal based on emotional interpretation? His lips parted. No sound emerged. Proceed, the judge said, waving him on with thin patience. They tried painting me as unstable, as vindictive, as a confused elderly woman who didn't understand mortgages. Tanisha dabbed under her eyes dramatically each time the lawyer mentioned Skylar's trauma, though her eyes stayed dry. But the tide shifted the moment Silas stood. He approached the judge with a measured calm and placed a thick stack of documents on her podium. Your Honor, we will be demonstrating a 6-year pattern of financial and emotional exploitation against Ms. Dri. What the plaintiffs call abandonment is self-preservation. He slid the top document forward. This is a record of the mortgage payments Ms. Dri made on behalf of her son and daughter-in-law. The total comes to $23,400. Marcus's shoulders stiffened. Silas continued. These are bank transfers, loans, and receipts totaling an additional $19,800 in financial support, never repaid. And here, another stack, are copies of late payment notices addressed to Ms. Dri as co-signer. She has been the only party keeping this mortgage afloat. The judge skimmed the sheets with narrowing eyes. Furthermore, Your Honor, Silas said, stepping slightly aside, we have evidence of fraudulent activity by Mr. Marcus Dri, which impacted Ms. Dri's ability to make informed financial decisions. The courtroom rustled. Whispering stirred like wind. Tanisha shot Marcus a sharp look, the mask cracking. Silas called the first witness, Brenda Miller. Brenda walked to the stand with a quiet dignity, her hands clasped together. After swearing in, she spoke clearly. I discovered falsified reimbursement invoices in Your Honor. Marcus altered them to receive extra money the company never owed him. She explained the inflated amounts, the patterns, the dates. She described how Marcus had bragged about manipulating his mother into signing documents she didn't understand. Did he ever express guilt? Silas asked. No, she said simply. If anything, he believed she owed him. The judge's lips tightened. Next came Darren Scott, who testified about stolen tools and threats. Then Patrice Washington, who described the faked overtime and Marcus's comments about me being easy to handle. Finally Leonard Bell, who recounted Marcus's attempt to get him to forge income statements. Each testimony felt like a stone placed carefully on a scale that had long been weighted unfairly against me. Then Silas called me. I walked to the stand, palms slightly damp but spine straight. After the oath, I took a breath and began. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. For 6 years, I worked day shifts and night shifts to cover bills that were not mine. I co-signed a house because I believed in my family. I paid for remodels I was never invited to see. I funded vacations I wasn't allowed to join. I bought gifts that were discarded. And I endured humiliation that chipped at me until I barely recognized myself. I didn't blame. I didn't dramatize. I simply told the truth. I told her about the grape juice on the dress, the laughter, the whispered insults. I described coming home to vandalism, threats, intimidation. I told her how Skylar had been sent to my home to manipulate me. And when I finished, the courtroom was silent. Mr. Trevino had no compelling cross-examination. He tried implying I was exaggerating. He tried suggesting I misunderstood. But Silas objected successfully each time, and the judge sustained with impatience. After the final testimony, Judge Thorne excused herself. The recess felt like an eternity. When she finally returned, she didn't sit immediately. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus and Tanisha. This court, she began, has reviewed the evidence and finds no basis for your claims." Trevino flinched. Ms. Estelle Dri acted entirely within her legal rights in withdrawing her co-signature. The court also finds credible and compelling evidence that she was subjected to years of financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and harassment. She paused. As such, the lawsuit is dismissed. Furthermore, Mr. Marcus Dri and Ms. Tanisha Hayes Dri are ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees totaling $4,500. Tanisha gasped, hand over her mouth. And, the judge continued, a 1-year restraining order is hereby issued. You are not to contact or approach Ms. Dri in any manner. Should you violate this order, criminal charges will follow. Marcus's face collapsed into shock. Tanisha looked as if the ground had tilted. Then Judge Thorne delivered the final blow. Mr. Dri, I strongly advise you to seek financial counseling and personal counseling. She tapped the stack of evidence. Your conduct illustrates deep issues that will not resolve themselves. When the gavel struck, everything inside me felt light. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just free. The months that followed were quiet. Peaceful. I finally slept without fear of phone calls demanding money or apologies I would never receive. The bank moved forward with foreclosure, and 3 months after the trial, Marcus and Tanisha moved out of their home. From what I heard through acquaintances, they ended up in a modest apartment. Marcus took a labor job. Tanisha picked up full-time retail hours. Skylar transferred schools. Life had humbled them. But something unexpected happened the day I saw Skylar again. She walked past my coffee shop window, taller now, older looking in her uniform. She laughed with a friend, carefree. And when her eyes met mine through the glass, she stopped. A beat passed. Recognition flickered. Then something else. Understanding. Maybe even regret. She lifted her hand slightly, as if to wave. I didn't wave back. But I smiled. Softly, sadly. And then she walked on. Sometimes change happens loudly, like a courtroom verdict. Sometimes it happens quietly, like a child's fleeting gesture that suggests maybe, just maybe, she sees the world differently now. 2 years have passed since the gavel fell in that courthouse, and in that time my life has reshaped itself so completely that sometimes I feel like I'm reading about someone else. Someone braver. Someone wiser. Someone who finally stepped out of the shadows of her own fears. It began slowly, almost shyly, a week after the trial. With no more mortgage emergencies, no more frantic phone calls, no more financial sinkholes disguised as just this once. I discovered something unexpected. I had money left over. Not a fortune, but enough for a small dream to take root. For decades, I had lived for other people's needs. Cooking meals they barely acknowledged, working shifts so they could enjoy comforts I never experienced, pretending holidays were joyful even when I left their house empty-handed and aching. But this time, the dream was for me. The storefront came first, an old shop with peeling paint and a crooked sign, tucked between a bookstore and a tailor's shop. The rent was manageable. The size was small but cozy. And the name came easily, Robert's Corner, after the man whose memory had carried me through every lonely night. With the $4,500 Marcus and Tanisha were ordered to pay, along with the savings I'd been hemorrhaging into their lives for years, I bought second-hand equipment, painted the walls a warm cream, and filled the space with potted plants and soft jazz. When I turned the sign to open on the first morning, the smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee drifted out into the street like a quiet announcement. A new chapter has begun. It surprised me how naturally the work fit me. I had spent a lifetime feeding people without recognition. Yet here, strangers thanked me. They complimented my pastries. They lingered at the tables, telling me their stories. They returned day after day, calling me by name. The people who came to my little shop became a sort of chosen family. There was Mrs. Hortensia, with her silver curls and gentle voice, who came twice a week to talk about her grandchildren. She asked about my health, my plans, my happiness, questions no one in my family had asked in years. There was Mr. Manuel, a widower with warm eyes and a habit of bringing me wildflowers he found on his morning walks. He took his breakfast at the same corner table every day at 8 o'clock, reading the paper while I prepared his coffee exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, 1 stir, no more. And then there was Brenda Miller, my first employee, who walked into the shop on opening day and hugged me with tears in her eyes. She told me she was honored to work for a woman who valued honesty. I told her the honor was mine. Weekends at Robert's Corner became a haven for people who needed connection. I hosted poetry nights where elderly neighbors read pieces they had tucked away for years. Story swaps where customers shared life lessons. Board game afternoons for seniors who were too often forgotten. The shop wasn't just a business. It was a place where people felt seen. And maybe, in creating that space for others, I finally created one for myself. The restraining order expired 6 months ago, but there has been no contact from Marcus or Tanisha. Through the grapevine, I learned they moved again, this time into a smaller apartment in a less expensive area. Marcus works outdoors now, landscaping yards for modest pay. The man who once polished granite countertops I funded now trims hedges in the cold mornings. Tanisha works full-time at a supermarket, juggling shifts, her manicured life replaced by something more grounded. Skylar attends a different school now, one without private tuition or expensive uniforms. They are living the life they could afford without me. And strangely, I don't feel anger. Not anymore. Life has a way of teaching lessons far more gently, and far more sternly, than any courtroom or conversation. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the street outside Robert's Corner glowed gold, I looked up from the counter and saw a familiar figure across the road. Marcus. He had thinner shoulders now, and his work clothes were streaked with dirt and grass. He stood motionless for several seconds, staring at the shop front, at the sign, at me behind the counter. Our eyes met through the glass. He didn't approach. He didn't wave. He simply looked, long enough for me to recognize what flickered behind his expression. Not entitlement. Not manipulation. But respect. Maybe even a sliver of pride. And then he walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk without a word. Last month, the local Chamber of Commerce named my shop Small Business of the Month. They sent a reporter who interviewed me for the newspaper. She asked about my journey, my late husband, my resilience. At one point she leaned forward and asked, "Do you regret anything?" I didn't have to think long. "The only regret," I said, "is waiting so long to treat myself with the respect I gave everyone else." The quote made it into the article. Suddenly, women from all over town came to meet me, to tell me I inspired them, that they too had families who drained them, who overlooked them, who took without gratitude. Many of them were older. Some were younger. But all of them carried the same quiet ache. And all of them walked out with lighter shoulders, as if speaking their truth aloud had released years of heavy silence. This year, Christmas doesn't fill me with dread. Instead of buying gifts for people who wouldn't appreciate them, I decorated the cafe with garlands, twinkling lights, and a tree made of stacked books tied with ribbon. I baked gingerbread squirrels and peppermint cookies. Mrs. Hortensia and Mr. Manuel helped hang ornaments. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a dinner for anyone without family nearby. The tables were full. The laughter was warm. The gratitude was real. And for the first time in decades, I ended the night without tears. My apartment looks different now too. Instead of feeling like a hiding place, it feels like home. I filled the walls with paintings that made me smile. I grew plants in the windows that stretched toward the sun each morning. I no longer keep my dishes tucked away. Now they sit proudly in a cabinet I refinished myself. Every Sunday, I attend church and then walk to the park with Mr. Manuel. He never asks for anything. He simply enjoys my company. Sometimes he brings pie. Sometimes I bring sandwiches. And sometimes we say nothing at all, letting the quiet speak for us. I never knew companionship could feel so peaceful. Tonight, as I closed the cafe, I stood at the window a moment longer, watching the reflection of the warm lights behind me. The woman staring back at me, 66 years old, with soft lines around her eyes and flour still dusted on her sleeve, looked strong, capable, whole. I don't have the big family holidays I used to fantasize about. I don't have grandchildren running to me with arms wide open. I don't have a son who checks on me, or a daughter-in-law who thanks me. But I have something I never had before. Self-respect. And the deep, quiet joy of knowing that I built a life that belongs entirely to me.